Welcome to Life Stories, where courage and resilience take center stage. Today, we bring you the powerful journey of Marcus Johnson, a man who turned injustice into a spark for change. In a moment of profound confrontation, Marcus stood tall against workplace discrimination, inspiring not just his colleagues but an entire community. His story is a testament to the strength it takes to challenge prejudice and the profound impact one voice can have. Join us as we dive into this tale of transformation and triumph. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's inspiring journey. The sun rose over the bustling city of Chicago, its golden rays piercing through the glass facade of the sleek office building where New Horizons Corporation stood tall. Inside, the air was filled with the quiet hum of keyboards and the occasional murmur of colleagues sharing stories from the weekend. For most, it was just another Monday, a routine beginning to a week of deadlines and meetings. But for Marcus Johnson, this Monday felt anything but ordinary. Marcus was a 34-year-old man with a sharp mind and a quiet determination that set him apart. His presence was marked by crisp suits, polished shoes, and a demeanor that spoke of resilience. He had worked at New Horizons for 5 years, pouring his heart into the job not just for personal success but to break the barriers his family had faced for generations. His father had always said, "Hard work is the key, son. Show them what you're made of." And Marcus did just that. Day after day, despite the storm brewing around him, Karen Mitchell, his manager, had a reputation. To some, she was a fierce leader, rising swiftly through the corporate ranks. To Marcus, however, she was a source of relentless tension. It started small, dismissive glances during meetings, a sharp tone whenever he presented an idea. Over time, her behavior became harder to ignore. She would criticize him louder than anyone else, diminish his contributions, and take credit for his work. The unspoken hostility lingered like a dark cloud, making each day feel heavier than the last. That morning, as Marcus walked into the office clutching his coffee mug, he was met with a chilling sight: his presentation slides, the ones he had painstakingly prepared over weeks, had been altered. His carefully crafted arguments were replaced with shallow bullet points, stripped of the depth he had poured into them. At the bottom of the document were Karen's initials, as if she had done the work herself. A wave of frustration washed over him. This wasn't the first time Karen had undermined him, but today felt different. Something about the blatant erasure of his efforts struck a nerve. As he settled at his desk, Karen's voice sliced through the air, her tone smug and commanding. "Good morning, Marcus. I made a few changes to your slides. They were a bit too complicated for the clients." Marcus looked up, meeting her gaze with a steady calm that belied the storm inside him. "I see that," he said evenly. "I would have appreciated a heads-up before the changes were made." For a brief moment, Karen's smile faltered, then returned sharper than before. "That's why I'm the manager. I know what works best for our clients," she retorted, her words a subtle jab that landed squarely. Marcus clenched his jaw, choosing silence over confrontation. He knew better than to argue in the middle of the office, but the frustration simmered beneath his calm exterior. He glanced at the clock. His presentation was just hours away. He decided he wouldn't let her derail him, not today. As the morning unfolded, Marcus found himself oscillating between anger and determination. He replayed Karen's words in his mind, trying to focus on what mattered, delivering his presentation with the precision and passion it deserved. He knew his ideas were solid, even if Karen had tried to strip them down. This was his moment to reclaim the narrative. When the time came, the team gathered in the conference room, the air buzzing with anticipation. Marcus stood at the front, his heart pounding in his chest. He had rehearsed every line, every transition, but nothing could prepare him for Karen's interruptions. Twice during his presentation, she interjected with pointed questions, attempting to undermine his credibility. Her tone was not one of genuine inquiry but of subtle sabotage. Still, Marcus pressed on. His voice was steady, his words deliberate. He wove in details Karen had removed, his passion evident in every slide. His co-workers nodded along, clearly impressed by his depth of knowledge. When he finished, the room erupted in applause, a rare and powerful moment of recognition. Vanessa, a colleague who had always admired Marcus's work ethic, spoke up. "Great job, Marcus. That was really insightful." But Karen wasn't done. Her smile was tight, her voice dripping with condescension. "Yes. Well, it seems Marcus had some help with this. The team effort really shines through." The comment stung, but Marcus kept his expression neutral. As the room emptied, Karen approached him. "A word in my office," she said curtly. He followed her, his mind racing. Karen's office was cold, a reflection of her demeanor. She gestured for him to sit, but Marcus remained standing, sensing that this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. Karen's tone was icy as she began. "You've been walking a fine line lately, Marcus. The way you handled that presentation, borderline insubordination." Marcus blinked, stunned. "Insubordination? For delivering my presentation effectively?" Karen leaned forward, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "For going beyond what was necessary. You made me look incompetent in front of the team." Her words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Marcus felt his chest tighten. "With all due respect, Karen, I simply wanted to present the full scope of my work." Her voice rose, sharp and cutting. "Don't forget your place here, Marcus. You're not the decision maker. You do the work you're assigned and leave the thinking to people like me." It was in that moment, as the phrase "people like me" lingered in the air, that something inside Marcus snapped. He took a deep breath, his hands trembling at his sides. He knew this was no longer just about him. It was about every unspoken slight, every injustice that had ever gone unchecked. And for the first time, Marcus realized he couldn't stay silent. Marcus stood there, stunned into silence as Karen's words echoed in his mind. The phrase "people like me" lingered, cutting deeper than anything else she had said before. He inhaled slowly, willing himself to stay composed. His heart raced, his hands clenched at his sides. But his voice, when it emerged, was calm and steady. "Karen," he began, the weight of his ancestors' struggles and his own quiet resilience laced into every syllable. "What you just said is not only disrespectful, it's unacceptable. And I won't stand here and let you demean me or anyone else like that." Karen's smirk faltered, replaced with a flicker of unease. "You're being dramatic," she said. But her voice lacked its usual edge. Marcus took a step closer, meeting her gaze. "Dramatic? No. I'm being honest. Let me tell you something." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "My great-grandfather worked the fields of Mississippi as a sharecropper, dreaming of a better life for his children. My grandfather marched in Selma, fighting for the right to vote. And my father, he spent his life telling me that no matter how much the world tries to tear you down, you stand tall because your worth isn't defined by someone else's prejudice." Karen's face tightened as Marcus spoke, the room growing heavier with every word. "I didn't come here to be anyone's punching bag," he continued, his voice unwavering. "I've worked too hard, harder than you could ever imagine, to be where I am. And no matter what you say, you can't take that away from me." Karen opened her mouth to retort, but Marcus raised a hand, stopping her. "No, let me finish. You've had your say, now it's my turn." He gestured toward the window, his gaze momentarily lost in the bustling city below. "Do you know how exhausting it is to walk into this office every day, knowing I'm judged not by my skills or my work ethic but by the color of my skin? To carry the weight of assumptions and stereotypes everywhere I go, yet still show up and give my all?" His eyes returned to hers, blazing with determination. "I deserve respect, Karen. Not because of my title or my credentials, but because I'm a human being. And so does everyone else in this office." The silence that followed was deafening. Karen looked at him, her expression a mix of anger and disbelief. But for the first time, she seemed unsure. Before she could respond, the door to her office creaked open. Marcus turned to see a small group of co-workers standing there, their faces a mix of shock and admiration. They had heard everything. Vanessa stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "Marcus, that was incredible. And you're absolutely right, this has gone on for far too long." One by one, the others nodded in agreement. Karen's power, which once seemed absolute, now felt fragile. The atmosphere had shifted. The weight of unspoken truths was now out in the open. Karen's expression hardened, but she said nothing as Marcus left her office. He walked back to his desk, his pulse racing, his hands still trembling slightly. He had said what needed to be said, but the consequences of his words loomed large in his mind. How would the company respond? Would they brush it off? Or would they finally confront the deep-seated issues that had been allowed to fester for so long? Later that afternoon, an email from Human Resources landed in everyone's inbox. The subject line read, "Immediate meeting, workplace conduct." Marcus's stomach churned as he read the message. The meeting was mandatory and scheduled for 3 p.m. When the time came, the conference room was packed. Karen sat stiffly at the head of the table, her usual air of authority replaced with visible discomfort. Elena Chavez, the HR director, stood at the front of the room. She was known for her no-nonsense demeanor but also for her fairness. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her voice calm but firm. "As some of you may be aware, an incident occurred today that has brought to light serious concerns about our workplace culture. We're here to address that." Elena's gaze swept across the room before landing on Marcus. "First, I want to thank Marcus for his courage in speaking up. It takes immense strength to confront injustice, especially in an environment where it's been allowed to persist." Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her expression unreadable. Elena continued, her tone unyielding. "What happened today is unacceptable. Let me be clear, New Horizons Corporation has a zero-tolerance policy for any form of discrimination or harassment. As of this moment, an internal investigation is underway, and appropriate actions will be taken." The room was silent, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope not just for himself but for everyone who had endured similar experiences in silence. After the meeting, several co-workers approached Marcus. Vanessa was the first. "Marcus," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I'm so sorry. I should have said something sooner. I saw how she treated you, and I didn't do anything. That's on me." Another co-worker, Kevin, added, "Man, I don't even know what to say. You stood up for all of us today, whether we realized it or not." Marcus accepted their apologies with grace but made one thing clear. "This isn't just about me," he said. "It's about making sure no one else has to go through this. If we want change, it has to come from all of us." The spark had ignited, and Marcus knew the journey was only beginning. The morning after the tense meeting, the atmosphere at New Horizons Corporation was different. Conversations that once skirted around difficult topics now carried a new edge of honesty. People moved through the office quietly, their usual chatter replaced with hushed discussions about what had unfolded the day before. Marcus could feel the weight of their gazes as he walked to his desk. Some were supportive, offering smiles or nods of encouragement. Others avoided eye contact, their discomfort palpable. Change was in the air, but it came with unease. Karen Mitchell, Marcus's manager, was noticeably absent. Word had spread that she had been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. For Marcus, the news brought no satisfaction, only a quiet resolve. He hadn't spoken out to see her removed. He had spoken out because it was necessary, because the workplace culture had become too toxic to ignore. But her absence left a void, a reminder of how deeply the company needed to address its issues. That afternoon, Elena Chavez called another meeting. The subject line of the email read, "Next steps for a better workplace." When Marcus arrived at the conference room, he noticed a different energy among his colleagues. There was a mix of apprehension and curiosity, as though everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Elena stood at the front, her posture confident, her expression thoughtful. "Yesterday," she began, "marked a turning point for this company. The events that unfolded were difficult, but they revealed something we can no longer ignore. We have a problem, a deep-seated cultural problem, and it's our responsibility to fix it." Her words hung in the air, heavy but necessary. Marcus glanced around the room and saw nods of agreement. Vanessa, who had become one of his closest allies, gave him a reassuring smile. Elena continued, "As part of our response, we will be implementing a comprehensive initiative to address workplace bias and foster inclusivity. This will include mandatory training, facilitated discussions, and the creation of a diversity and inclusion council to ensure that every voice is heard." The announcement sparked murmurs throughout the room. It was a bold move for the company, one that signaled a willingness to change. But it was also a challenge, a call to action for everyone in the room to reflect on their own behavior and biases. When the meeting ended, Marcus stayed behind to speak with Elena. "I appreciate what you're doing," he said, his voice steady but sincere. "But I hope this isn't just about damage control. Real change takes more than meetings and training sessions." Elena nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You're right, Marcus. That's why we need people like you, people who are willing to speak up and hold us accountable. I hope you'll consider joining the Diversity and Inclusion Council. We need your perspective." The offer caught Marcus off guard. He had never seen himself as a leader, but the events of the past few days had shown him the power of his voice. After a moment of reflection, he nodded. "If it means making sure no one else has to go through what I did, I'm in." Over the next few weeks, the company began to shift. Stories emerged from other employees who had faced similar experiences but had been too afraid to speak up. Marcus listened to each one, offering support and encouragement. It was clear that Karen's behavior had been part of a larger issue, one that the company was now forced to confront. The Diversity and Inclusion Council held its first meeting in a smaller conference room. But the turnout was larger than anyone had anticipated. Employees from all levels of the company showed up, eager to share their stories and ideas. Marcus took a seat at the head of the table, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the potential for change. Vanessa was one of the first to speak. "I think we need to start by looking at how we hire and promote people. There's so much talent in this company that gets overlooked because of unconscious bias." Kevin, another colleague, added, "And it's not just about hiring. It's about creating an environment where everyone feels valued, where people aren't afraid to speak up." Marcus listened intently, taking notes and making sure every voice was heard. For the first time in his career, he felt like he was part of something bigger, something that could truly make a difference. Outside of work, Marcus's story began to gain traction in the local community. He was invited to speak at events, sharing his experiences and encouraging others to stand up against injustice. His message was simple: change doesn't happen in silence. It happens when people have the courage to speak out, even when it's uncomfortable. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus found himself reflecting on the journey so far. The path ahead was still uncertain. But he knew one thing for sure: the spark had been lit, and the ripple effect was already in motion. As the weeks turned into months, New Horizons Corporation transformed into a workplace defined by respect, inclusion, and accountability. Marcus Johnson's courageous stand became the foundation of a lasting cultural shift, inspiring others to use their voices for change. The Diversity and Inclusion Council flourished under Marcus's leadership, fostering open dialogue and meaningful progress. Beyond the office, Marcus's story resonated far and wide. His speeches at community events and organizations ignited conversations about equity and resilience, reminding people everywhere that one voice could spark a revolution. Walking into the office one morning, greeted by smiles and nods of genuine respect, Marcus felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. His journey had been one of hardship and triumph, but it had mattered not just for him, but for everyone. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more inspiring tales of courage, growth, and change. Together, we can build a better world.